Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And thanks for letting me come and talk to you. Just a bit background. Yeah, I'm from Business Information Point at Oakhampton, and we do business support both to the agricultural community and to the general business, rural businesses across Devon, parts of Somerset. And yeah, so I'm going to talk about the agricultural transition. Interestingly, in the chat with the two gentlemen I was with, we talked quite a bit about agriculture and where that's sat. And really, agriculture is part of the problem, but it can also be part of the solution. And that's where the industry will be encouraged to move to. So change is coming. So next slide, Harry. So yeah, so we've got a whole new support system being put in place, and these were the sorts of reasons that came out of DEFRA for why the change could happen and what they're going to do. BPS is what they call the basic payment scheme. So basically, at the minute, farmers get a payment for every acre of land that they have or hectare of land that they have. As long as they fill in a form and behave themselves to some degree, but that's going to change. Yeah, move on, Harry. So what's driving it? Obviously, the subject that we're all talking about here this afternoon, climate change, is a big one. As I said, agriculture is part of that. But obviously, leaving the EU gave the government the opportunity to change the agricultural support systems because without being constrained with what the rest of the other 27 countries wanted to do. The key bit around that is protection of soil, water and air, it's all linked with climate change. And of course, you would have seen last week, the National Food Policy was published. So that will influence things. I put trade deals with a question mark because whilst there's been a lot of discussion about the Australian trade deal, really, it's very difficult to see how that might impact on food production in this country at the moment. And then finally, of course, all that links with change in how agriculture is going to be supported. So it's already happening because, as I said, those basic payments are going to be phased out. And in the Environmental Land Management Scheme, which is the replacement for those payments, is currently being piloted. Move on, Harry. So just to show you what's going to happen to farmers. So the average farmer would have about 15,000 a year through their BPS. So you see there that table in terms of what happens and how it's been cut. So by 2024, if you're under 40,000 pounds, 50% is gone within the next 3.5 years. But this time round, never been done before, but they're hitting the bigger claimants harder earlier. So clearly somebody, a large farm of about 1,600 acres or so is going to be hit with a 61% cut by 2024, which will be significant, as you'll see as we move through the slides. I thought because we're all talking about small communities, our communities. I'll give you a few examples of what that means to your local economy. So I just did a quick search. There's a DEFRA database where all these payments are published. And I did a search for farms with an Oakhampton postcode. Those farms in 2020 received nearly £9 million worth of payments from the government or from us in terms of the public. And of that, 7 million came from that BPS or that direct support. The difference, the 2 million that's not there, will be existing environmental schemes that are currently taking place. And obviously, close to Dartmoor, there'll be more of those that go on. And then I did the same exercise for Honiton, and you can see there that 3.7 million will eventually be coming out of that local economy. So it's not insignificant funds that are being taken away. Move on, Harry. How dependent is the industry on these funds? And this is a bit of the scary bit, really, because if you think about the farms around you, within your parishes, I would imagine a lot of them will be what's known as lowland grazing livestock. And if you look at, this is a data set of 14, 15, 16, 17. It's a little bit old, and it has improved a bit in the last year or so, but that's not to say that it's going to stay improved. But if you look at that lowland grazing livestock, which as I said is the biggest sort of area in terms of the southwest and the types of farms that we have, 94% of their 15,500 profits across those years came from the direct payment. So without the direct payment, you can see there isn't a lot left. I mean, the bit is less reliant on it. It's obviously poultry, but there's not a lot of them. And if you've got some dairy farms in your parish, they are less impacted by this as well. Move on, Harry. So what does this mean to individual businesses? During the autumn and winter, we did a pilot project with Natural England, looking at how the farms would be impacted. So this was 27 farms in North Devon, and we were looking at how the new schemes would balance out their current farming practices. And what we did, we looked at them and we came up with the total business profit there, which was, you can see, with 28,000 odd. The actual payment they received from government was actually greater than the profit, because the actual profit from the actual farming bit, the production of meat, the production of cereals, whatever it was, actually lost money. So not a healthy situation. Yeah, move on, Harry. So this is the same farms. So there's their 30,000 that they were receiving, and that's what's going to happen over the life of the next 7 years as these payments are taken out. And then if we move on again, Harry, we can see what happens. So there's that current profit that they might be having, bringing into that farm. And clearly, if nothing changes, then they'll be in a loss-making situation by 2028. And certainly the farm will be struggling from about 24 onwards. Okay, move on. So we said that something else is going to come in to replace these direct payments, and this is the environmental land management schemes that they're going to bring in. Move on, Harry. So this is what environmental land management scheme is going to try and deliver, what it's trying to do. So it's going to try and improve the air and water quality, enhance biodiversity, allow public access, protect the environment, you know, that we all look out on every day from our window or when we drive to work. So all those things are going to be, that's the bit that are going to be supported. And actually they've done a bit of a calculation right at the bottom of that slide, which is quite interesting, because the previous schemes, farmers have been paid what they called income forgone. So DEFRA would do a calculation of, if the farmer put 5 acres into a bumblebee mix, say for example, they would actually compensate him for the crop that he's lost. So it's for that. But actually, when they actually did the calculation, they discovered that for each pound they put in, which was meant to just compensate, they actually gained £3.20 worth of public goods. So actually, the schemes are more valuable than DEFRA had originally anticipated. You can move on, Harry. So what does Elms, as it's known, consist of? Well, there's 3 elements. There's the sustainable farming incentive, which is currently just starting to pilot. And there's 2 other bits that we'll just touch on in a minute, but they're in development. Move on, Harry. So local nature recovery. This is about looking at a particular location. It may be a catchment. So you may have got a river that needs protection in terms of that it's not of good quality at the minute. And this will provide actions and then funding linked to that, to the range of farmers and land managers within that particular area. And as I said, early stage of development. Next one, Harry. So landscape recovery, this is much bigger. This will be looking at rewilding, peat bog restoration on quite a big scale. You know, you could be talking the whole of Dartmoor, maybe even bigger areas, but very early stage development. So it's a lot to learn about that before we can say much more. So in terms of sustainable farming incentive, which is the bit that's starting now, these are the sorts of actions that are doing. So to protect the water bodies, we're going to have buffer strips to hold the water from running into the stream quicker by excluding the livestock and not grazing it. Move on, Harry. Hedgerows, we're going to see, and maybe in your part of the world, wherever you are, you may think, well, the hedges are very tidy. Farmers are quite tidy people often, and they will trim their hedges every year, but they're going to get quite strong payments for actually letting the hedges grow more. And alongside that, they're also going to be asked, if they want to take up these payments, they're going to be asked to allow hedgerow trees to grow up. Whilst they might say 400, 200, 100 meters, they don't have to be 400, 200, or 100 meters. They can be a clump of trees that, 10 trees would cover 1,000 meters, for example. So they won't be regimented like soldiers, but you should see more trees in the landscape. Move on, Harry. Protection of soils, and I'm sure, I know certainly down in some parts of the South Hams, your parishes would have seen flooding with soil because of the fields had a lot of exposed soil. So there's a lot more actions going to take place to try and reduce that. So the farmers, if they want to get these payments, will have to make sure that the soil is covered with growing crops in order to try and hold back the water. They're going to encourage more direct drilling, so less ploughing, and also looking at herbal lays and permanent grass on high-risk land. Move on, Harry. And also, there's a couple of bits that, again, early part of development, but yes, there will be the creation and improvement of woodland, existing woodland, and also small bits of woodland on the farms. And they're also looking at agroforestry as well. Okay. Now, so that's a lot of things that farmers are going to be asked to do, and if they want to do them, they'll be paid for. So that's one part of the jigsaw, shall we say. But on the other hand, they're also going to be encouraged over the next 3 to 4 years to actually invest in their farms. What's behind this, as far as I can see, is we're going to see farms that are going to have parts of their farms that is dedicated to the environment, but then on the other hand, they're doing actions that are going to encourage the farmers to be more productive on other parts of the farm. So hence, there's going to be this farm and investment fund. I won't go into much detail, but move on, Harry. So it's going to do this sort of thing. It's going to encourage people to encourage environmentally sustainable farming and land management. So they'll be getting grants to take up these different types of activity. On again, obviously slurry on dairy farms, big issue. And in the recent years, last 5-6 years, there's not been any grants for actual containing the slurry. For example, there's been grants for covering it, it's been grants for putting it on the ground in a more efficient way, but this new scheme will actually cover the whole investment in terms of the stores, the pumps, and all the things that are needed. Because as we move forward, the farmers will only be allowed to put slurry and farm-yard manure onto crops when the crops can actually physically take it up and use it effectively. So just throwing around slurry in the middle of winter when the crop isn't growing does nothing for the environment, because all the nitrogen that's in there will just go in the air. So the farmers will need to get into this and make sure they've got enough storage so they can put on the organic matter when it's best needed. Move on, Harry. There's also going to be some innovation research and development grants. Well, move on, Harry, because the other bit on the grant side, they also want to try and improve the health of the animals on the farms. So there's going to be grants coming in to get vets to go into farms more proactively and do diagnostic testing for certain diseases like bovine BVD there, to try and improve the productivity of the existing herd, flock, whatever it is, by making sure that we can minimize disease. Move on, Harry. You will notice right at the beginning of this first slide when our minister mentioned about paying farmers to get out. It's currently out for consultation. You may see quite a bit in the press. It is up to a maximum of 100,000 per farm. Sounds a lot of money, but actually very few will get that. And it's actually, all it's doing is bringing forward the payments that they might have had between now and 2027. Personally, I don't see a big take up of this, except in quite particular circumstances. Because if it's a partnership, and most farm businesses are sort of a partnership, that the business, if the senior member of the partnership was to say, yeah, I'm going to take my lump sum, that means that all the rest of those younger generations that are part of that partnership will be excluded for all schemes going forward. So that wouldn't make any sense for the business. But what will happen is from 2024, at the minute, as I said, they get paid so much per acre or hectare of land. That requirement's going to disappear from 2024. So from 2024, if they've got land or they haven't got land, they will still get those reducing payments over time. And that may be the point when land will be freed up more in the future, because people might think, okay, I'm going to get my top up to my pension, and then the next generation can take on, or I might let the land to a new person wanted to come into the industry. But we'll see the results of the consultation in the autumn. What people are predicting, Anderson's big agricultural consultants did a report the other day. I've not been able to access the whole report because they want £3,500 to actually see it. So I'm afraid our business can't afford that. But they're predicting a 20% fall in farm numbers over the next 7 years. So there will be a reduction in farms. Almost all farm businesses will need to change in what they do. They will need to engage with Elms unless they are particularly productive. You know, think back to those percentage of profits that the BPS provided. You know, some of the more intensive dairy farmers will probably say, no, I'm just going to crack on and carry on producing my litres of milk. Those chicken farms, for example, they probably won't engage. But the farmers that are left will need to improve their productivity as well as engaging with the land management schemes. And they'll also be looking at developing new income streams. Nothing new there. Diversification's been around for as long as I've been sat in this seat. So is there a role for you guys? I would say yes, because I think it's that understanding that farming is changing. You know, perhaps communicating with your communities that you know what's around them is going to change somewhat. Be supportive of the changes that are required. Think about your planning policies for new business activities if these businesses are to remain resilient and profitable. Encouraging local purchasing of food and drink, because that may well be an area that some people will go down and think, okay, we can add value to what we do. We will have less of it, and you know, therefore, can we do that? And I did touch earlier on about access. Farmers will be paid to if they can open up access routes. So there may be footpaths in your parish that actually, with a bit of work with the local farmer and landowner, you could add another half mile and you create a really good circular route, those sorts of things. Next one, Harry. Okay, just a bit of an advert. As you can think, farmers are going to need a bit of help, and actually, you know, have they really engaged with this? Do they really know what's happening? Some are, some aren't. So last year, DEFRA funded 9 pilot schemes across England, and in partnership with Devon County Council, we led a small scheme supporting 30 farms in Mid and East Devon. So from those pilots, now DEFRA pushed out an England-wide scheme to commence from next month for a period of 7 months. And we've again worked with DCC and have had a successful bid that we learned about last week, where we're going to provide support to 773 farms in Devon and Somerset. And that excludes Dartmoor and Exmoor, because those patches are going to have support through the Prince's Countryside Fund. You may think that's a lot of farms, but actually when you work it out, that's only 7.5% of the total farms in Devon and Somerset, excluding Dartmoor and Exmoor. So whilst it seems a lot, we're not looking, you know, we need to reach out to people. And what we want to do is we want to get to those people that are hard to reach. And I think yourselves and your positions as parish councils really could help with that. We would really like your help, and for your parish magazines example, perhaps in the minutes of your meetings, because we need to get to the people that don't normally come. Okay, so what we want to do is yeah, sorry, I was just reading the chat from Roxy there. So yeah, we're going to do workshops, specialist workshops, and one-to-one support. If you've got anybody immediately you can think in mind that could do with some help, there is a small program that's we're currently delivering until that new one starts. Yeah, Roxy, you asked a question there. I would say the answer to that is why is actually it's a natural progression. We've seen the numbers of farms fall over the generations, really. As small farms decide that it's time to pack up, what tends to happen is the farm next door or somebody else actually takes on that land and grows it. In my own personal situation, I was a tenant farmer with a Duchy of Cornwall for 35 years. When we left 3 and a bit years ago, our farm was then amalgamated with the farm next door. That's what tends to happen.